This is a male space, and today I have with me Darleen Lev, and I was motivated to speak to Darleen after I saw a number of interviews with her on YouTube, particularly one on the Radical Center. So, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Darleen Lev, and I am a writer and a professor living in Brooklyn. And I'm working on a book called A Requiem for the Patriarchy. And my book is about it's a proposal for resurrecting some of the things that we threw away when feminism and the matriarchy took over, which is, I think, what happened.
Okay. So, how did you discover? When did you discover the so-called manosphere? I mean, I use that term very broadly. I use it kind of loosely and broadly for all the talking heads, maybe even myself, even though I'm relatively new to YouTube. How did you discover the men's content?
Well, I was writing a novel called Sexodus. I don't think it was titled that at the time. And there was a lot of hysteria about rape around 2013, 2014 when I started the novel. And I was working on two characters that need to rely on each other to survive. And I had a different conflict in mind, but then this rape hysteria started up, and I got very interested in that. There was a woman at Columbia walking around with a mattress on her back. And I thought that this was taking things a little bit too far because if women are supposed to be sexually free, to my mind, that meant that you knew that you were walking into potentially dangerous situations, or so that's how I experienced it, and I took my punches. So I believe that you can't tell people that they can have unfettered sexual experiences and never ever walk into a situation that's uncomfortable or possibly even dangerous. And I also, around that time, was starting to wonder why I thought I was a progressive. And so I started tooling around on YouTube and came across a Janice Fiamengo
I know
video.
her. Yes. Yes.
And also Karen Strawn, perhaps you know Karen Strawn. Yeah, and then I started watching the men's conference lectures and whatnot. And so basically what wound up happening, which it already was in my mind anyway, was that the male character in Sexodus was, and actually this is based on a real person, by the way, somebody whose mother was married 3 or 4 times, subjecting him to numerous stepfathers, didn't know his biological father very well. And, so I cobbled together a case history basically in, what I was seeing men talking about in terms of the landscape post sexual revolution. And I would probably say also just the whole divorce bandwagon and what that subjects kids and maybe even especially sons to.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. And now we're going to go into the topics that we went over in our emails with each other. I'm going to go by this outline we drew up here. You said that you were in a conversation on Substack with a woman about abortion and responsibility. Now, I don't want to, in this video, get into, let's say, the morality or immorality of abortion. However, I do want to touch upon the concept of responsibility. Because with this unbridled sexual freedom that we have had in the sexual revolution that is still going on full force, sexual liberation, what I think has happened is there it is a complete disconnect between birth and sex, meaning the pill and let's say avenues of entertainment have taken all of that away, meaning all the responsibility and consequences of sex away, while still telling people, exhorting people to have sex with whoever they want, whenever they want, and how much they want. Now, I don't mean how much they want in terms of, let's say, inside of a serious relationship or marriage. If you want to have a lot of sex, go, that's fine. That's probably good for you and the partner. However, I mean the sexual quote freedom. Now, can you tell us a bit about not only maybe a little synopsis of this conversation, but the general? I think you and I would agree on the general theme of where this is going, this disconnect between the consequences of sex and sexual activity. And also, I believe that, as I said in a conversation with Noah Revoy, I believe that Hugh Hefner probably was the most influential in bringing this to the fore in America because he said that the Playboy, someone who reads Playboy, is a man who is only concerned about a woman's appearance, and that family and women are burdens unto the man. And he lives a lifestyle of fun, hedonism, and looking good. All the
Yeah.
responsibility is just something else that, just shove it.
Well, okay, so he helped things along quite a bit, and then we
Yes.
have what the women were doing, and here we are. Yeah, this person, I actually went back and forth with her quite a bit. I I think she was Gen Z, and she was ruining the fact that, or so she thought that men can have sex without consequences, and women can't. Women carry the entire burden. And I said, well, actually, there's no such thing for either party of sex without consequences. There's just not. But there used to be actually more consequences for men than there are now. And now it is true pretty much that women are bearing the brunt of the responsibility because whatever systems were in place to ensure that men provided for whatever spawned from their loins, shall we say, I mean, at least as far as he knew, um, has been jettisoned basically. And now it's just up to the woman, 100%, right? Whether she's going to have the baby, whether she's going to allow him to be involved or not, then that goes to court. Um, so it seems that the ideal that is floating around in the ethers that we're all supposed to be able to have sex without consequences. And I said, one of the main consequences for women is it's not good for your mental health to have sex with lots of people. And no, just for me it was never, I would leave a situation and think, why do I feel so bad? I'm supposed to like this, but I don't like this. And so what happened to me psychologically was I felt that there was something wrong with me.
Well, if you don't let me ask, you don't have to say anything that you do not want to, but perhaps if you're a woman who spills the beans and is you are seem to be a very honest person, is that some men might think, well, then if a woman's going to feel bad from these situations, I think a reasonable, valid question would be, why do they do it? You know, I mean, if you could answer.
Well, you know, let's just, so let me just backtrack a little bit. Um, so I was born in 1961, and I was born into a world where there was a family in every house, and there was a dad in just about every house. As a matter of fact, when I say that there was a dad in every house, I go back and I try to, because I pretty much knew who lived in every house in our subdivision, just like you say, you knew everybody in Queens, right? I knew the home situations pretty much of every kid in my class, and who lived in what house and what their parents looked like and so on. And then in the 70s, we get the divorce bandwagon, we get the pill, And we get abortion on demand in 1973, I think it was 72. I actually remember hearing this on the radio and thinking to myself, oh, good, I can do whatever I want. My mother had instilled in me that because I was female, I had to guard myself very carefully, and that one mistake could result in having to become a mother. And she was presenting this as some sort of punishment. And I would say that the narrative out there started to present this as some sort of punishment. And now we have this right to escape this punishment. That is the narrative that I ingested. And the whole feminist thing, I can hear Ken Burns narrating this now, and it's really funny because I recently watched this Ken Burns or somebody like that PBS documentary on feminism, and I can see the propaganda in it now that I wouldn't have been able to see, when I was 15 or even 20 years old. And but that's the narrative. It's punishment, it's drudgery, and now you have the right to escape it. And I am at a very impressionable age. I can honestly say that if there were no pill and if there were no abortion on demand, I wouldn't have been having sex with people I didn't know very well. I wouldn't have been doing it in the first place. This opened the floodgates. Plus, you have the fashions changing practically overnight. I went to Wendy Ward Charm School, learned how to put on my white gloves in the right way and how to remove them in the right way and how to dress modestly and then all of a sudden it's hot pants and skin tight jeans and halter tops and all of this. And I actually, when I was my friends were wearing things like that, but I actually wasn't. I was still wearing my Camp Willoughby t-shirt, and I wasn't dressing like that. Uh, there's actually, I mean, if you really think about it, there's a picture of me with pigtails and I'm wearing a t-shirt and modest shorts, and my friends are wearing these hip huggers and halter tops, and we're 11 years old. And
Uh, yeah, that's
I look at this now and I think, I knew I didn't want to dress like that. I was
well.
questioning it.
Well, looking back, when I was around, I was 11 years old, and let's say 90, 91, 11 years old. I did not see people dressed like that. Well, actually, it was shortly after. I would say that seventh grade, started middle school, that fashion was there in the early 90s also. I mean, later than what you're talking about, but it was already there. And looking back, as I told you before, I do have a daughter and a son. And what would come to my mind, does come to my mind right now, is the airheadedness that I've been talking to you about before this video. Is that what kind of parents would allow this, and what were they thinking? Because when I look back to my childhood and teenage years, what comes to my mind is, where was this father? Where was this mother? What were they thinking? Not just about the dress, but the code of conduct and also the company that specifically the females kept at very young ages. So one has to wonder, well, it's not really a wonder because there was much divorce, but I do think, as I told you before, that, and as I was going over with Dr. Stephen Baskerville about this laissez-faire parenting, pretty much checked out parenting. Like, why go through the rigors of having to discipline or keep boundaries on one's minor children? Which, to me, looking back, as I've been saying here, I don't get it. I don't understand it. And that's going to lead us also in the what you spoke about, I believe, well, if I recall correctly, in the videos that you've done, is that it was not just sexual revolution, but a certain kind of coarseness that infected our culture, generally speaking. That society became crass and dishonorable. As I was discussing with this man, Noah Reboy, he said that we either have an honor culture or a dishonor culture. And it seems to me, maybe this is a cynic in me, but this is the way I see it, is that United States, US society, American society is a dishonor culture. Like you said, that, for example, even in the 1960s and early 70s, that most of the entertainment there actually did have good values in the entertainment, meaning that what was depicted were solid homes, stand up people, and then gradually, as we go on and on, the culture becomes more violent, rude, and I would just say evil.
Yeah. Well, it was a dignity culture. And then we threw the dignity away. So I'm going to charm school. I'm wearing a very modest outfit in the Wendy Ward fashion show. I'm learning manners. And then this movement comes in. I'm going to say it's just like a storm cloud. It's abortion on demand. It's me, me, me. It's riding in on the waves, the whole hippie thing. And it really is like we threw away all of the olds and took on this I don't know what, but it's exactly what you're saying. It's like I remember thinking that I was supposed to act tough and that the last thing I was supposed to act like was a lady, that this was old fashioned, it was done. And I even, I took on some bad manners, like deliberately bad manners to get negative attention. I don't know what, but it does seem like that took over. I had a group of friends in high school. We called ourselves the Coyotes. There were five of us. And we did some incredibly crass, horrible, unladylike things that we were very proud of. I won't go into details. Um, but yeah, swearing, all of these things that in the 60s you didn't do, suddenly you're throwing away all of this. So I would say that the bridge really is like 1970, 71, 72, throwing all of that away and taking on this whole new cultural persona. And then the divorces start happening, and there were the kids whose mothers, who had single mothers, their fathers were gone, and you'd hang out at their house when you were supposed to be at school or after school. And that's where I had sex for the second time, in the basement of one of those kids' houses.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I one time told my friend, maybe he'll see this, maybe he won't, that back then, some of these homes, I would just call them free brothels, for lack
Yeah.
of a better word.
And his sister was, they had moved from the city, and his sister was, I think, going into the city, and she wore one of those rabbit fur chubby coats and called herself Jules, and reputedly liked black guys. And God only knows what she was up to, but she would disappear for months at a time.
Yeah, well, that's
And
why.
then what's the mother doing? And I knew this guy fairly well. I think the father was just completely out of the picture. And again, this was the new thing. This wasn't what it was like until about 1972.
Right, because even in like well, we could go on and on with these examples. I just give you an example is that even when I was telling one of my friends, my close friend, that we've done been in middle age, we've been doing a lot of reflecting, especially me because I want to put out this content and actually unravel how we got here, so that maybe one day we can go back to a more orderly society with better relations between the sexes, marriage, child raising, everything. But I
Yeah.
one time was telling him that I said, hey, do you know that many of these so-called exes of the women that we know, these exes are dead? Not from, let's say, diseases per se, that just simply spring up in a middle-aged or older man, but they're dead because of deadly activity or criminal activity. So when that's always led me to think, and I've actually asked my friend over and over, where were these parents? Meaning that who could picture this?
Well, in this case, this particular household I'm thinking of, the mother was working. I mean, I
Oh,
don't know, but at the same time, I got to say, I'm ambivalent about some of this because my friends and I now, upon reflection, were like, we lived in a very interesting period of time. We came of age, very interesting period of time that will never be repeated. It was woohoo, we can't get pregnant. I mean, it really was like a kind of a spring break for sexuality. And we absolutely recognize that some of us got very damaged by this and did terrible things. But I also do appreciate that we had more freedom than kids, adolescents have. We were kind of considered young adults, and I would argue that one of the biggest problems is that we should start uh, treating teenagers like young adults and not like children.
Yes.
Hold on a second. Sorry. I mean, in the 60s or like actually there were a lot of couples who were hippies that we might have babysat for, who already had kids, who got married and started having kids, even though they were like hippies. But they were still doing the fairly traditional thing of getting married and having children. And the kids were, around at parties. They
Yeah.
were still doing that. Get cut to my particular 1961. This is when it's going to start, where we're not going to have kids. So they were still doing the responsible thing. Even if they were smoking pot when, when the kids were asleep. Um, where was I? The cat.
It's all right. We were just going through the pretty much the
Oh, where were the parents? Oh yeah, where were the parents? I I had two parents. Most of my friends had two parents. One of the coyotes had a divorced mother who wasn't paying much attention. She was checked out most of the time, and their stepfather was a creepy. Um, but they did let us go out. We had curfews. I would come in and then I would just sneak right back out the window. And my parents didn't know what I was doing because they didn't know I was out. They thought I was home. Um, One of my other friends had very strict parents, and she did have to be home by a certain time. And uh, her parents actually, when we would make fun of her because of her parents, but they were doing the right thing.
yeah. No, yeah, I understand. And also that was going on until the 90s actually. So I see well, I've experienced some of what you experienced me, but even well, before I go into the next topic, there was a good times actually back then also because as you're saying, we did behave like young adults. We did go to different neighborhoods. We got on buses, we got on trains. We went and took our cars to other states. I think that
Mhm.
this what helicopter parenting has its maybe because we're living in a different time. I'm not sure if there is a perhaps a fear of increased crime or less safety. I'm not sure.
It's matriarchal, I would say.
Okay, well, that's one thing too because I'm assuming what you're saying is that if it's matriarchal, it's going to be more careful or
Yeah,
perhaps
more
more.
neurotic.
Yes, well, okay, neurotic is the term. Well, actually, that segues into what we're going to go over now. Is that this is a question that could take up, it has taken up entire books, and we do not have enough time. And as my guest, I'm going to mention again Dr. Stephen Baskerville. He said that every day, even with all the four books that he wrote, most of them, well, all of them dealing in some way with sexual revolution or the divorce industry, that he learned something new about feminism and sexual revolution every single day. And if you even go through the work of Janice Flamingo, well, you're going to be going down, you're going to be studying a lot actually of what she's gotten into with very great precision. So the question, what is feminism, is way too broad to cover in one video. We could be here for hours and days discussing what is feminism and all the different branches of feminism and all the different influencers. And was this one was this one pro voting? Did this one not want women to vote? Is this one pro pornography? This one was anti pornography. There's so many different strains that you can't even pinpoint what this.
Dissonant.
Yes. Was that?
It's dissonant and illogical is
Yes.
what feminism
Right,
is.
right, exactly. But you see, what I want to get to here is that I believe, and it's partly from being influenced in the writers that I follow, is that the main aims of feminism are one, unbridled sexual freedom, and two, 100% ownership of reproduction and child raising.
Yeah.
And I believe that the feminists know this, and I believe that even a lot of men who say that they are for feminism are so uneducated about it that when I question them, do you know what feminism is? Can you name one feminist writer or influencers? They cannot they can't answer because they don't know what it is. So I mean, I'm not trying to make them feel stupid, but I would say that if you're going someone's going to be a proponent of this, male or female, and they say I'm for feminism, can you really be for something that you don't even know about? I mean, if I ask these, I'm not trying to show off here. If I say to a man or a woman, do you know who let's say Germaine Greer or Barbara Seaman or Delma Hain, Simone de Beauvoir, all these feminists that we could keep on naming and naming, Andrea Dworkin, Gloria Steinem, Betty Friedan, we keep going down a lengthy list here, and they have not heard one of them. All they might have heard of Betty Friedan, and that's it. And when they say that feminism is not about something, I'll say, can you quote a feminist? Because that's what feminism is about. Go read this one. Go see the ramblings and statements by these feminists and see for yourself from the horse's mouth what feminism is about. And then when you say it to them, they'll say, actually, they don't have anything to say. So what's going on here? Why are all these people, even people who are not feminists, who are pro-feminists, they just think that feminism is voting and working. I'm all for women voting. I'm for feminism. I'm for women having a
No, it's
bank
about
account.
equality.
Yes. So really, if it's all about that, then how come people like Janice Flamingo, Roger Devlin, and Stephen Baskerville have compiled lengthy texts, even quoting, especially Dr. Daniel Linnaeus, because his book, The Case for Father Custody, has a lot of direct quotes from feminists themselves. I don't want to ramble on here more. I think I've gotten the point across. What's going on here?
What's feminism?
You obviously we could say that it's a
Well,
I don't know how to
I
define
think
it.
I think that men, and I'm just thinking of some of the men that I know in my circle who I would say that men have always, from the beginning of time, been reacting to women in some way. I think that women actually have always had much more power over men than feminism is willing to admit.
Yes.
It's the currency is that they were oppressed. Well, I would say that I can steel man that in a way, if you are dependent on a man, because biologically women were dependent on men. And biologically, the man lays the women down and, injects the seed into her, and then she's lying back and she's growing larger, and then she's enslaved to this creature that was created by that. So women are oppressed in a way by nature, and they are reading that as oppression by men because it is the men that they're dependent upon in order for this whole reproductive system to work. And so what is feminism? It's an abject, idiotic, counterproductive rejection of nature. It's a
Well,
denial of nature. It's a complete resistance to nature. And you might notice that the longer it goes on, the more endangered our human species has become. I mean, I'm very interested in this, in the low birth rate and how fertility is way, way down pretty much across the developed world. This is fascinating. And why is that happening? There are more unintentionally childless women. And in my own generation, most of the women that I know don't have kids.
right. Now, okay, thank you for that.
Why don't they have kids? Because they put the career first. I mean, everything that feminism sort of, the narrative tells women to do basically endangers their fertility.
Right. I agree with what you're saying. Thank you for that. I mean, well, I actually consume some so-called modern feminist content on YouTube. I'm not going to name them. I'm not here to have an EB for hostility with people. I'm trying to have a conversation in a a peaceful way. But the what I see repeated over and over again in these feminist content is stating the term the patriarchy. Also, literally all men are like X, meaning all men are narcissists, all men are abusive, and also there's a slew of in many of these recitations of their past abusive exes and narcissistic exes.
Mhm.
And eventually, one again, I believe, though I might be incorrect, that a reasonable question would be, how could there be this much contact with narcissists? I mean, I know many people. I'm not the most popular guy around, I'm not a celebrity, but I work with many kinds of people throughout the years. Even living in Queens, I've met people from all over, from all socioeconomic backgrounds, lower class, poor, rich, all ethnicities, races, all ages, etc. I have met actual narcissists, right? But I have never, ever come across this many narcissists.
Yeah.
What is going on here?
Well, I think, if I just kind of retrace my own steps,
Yeah.
um, I said just for me, basically, my whole trajectory through all of this is one of cognitive dissonance. From all I could think about was having babies and getting married, quite honestly. But I was also a writer and I spent a lot of time alone and I spent a lot of time reading. And so I want to be a writer, but I also want to be a mother and I want to and then by the time I come of age, the narrative is that you can escape these abuses now because you can get divorced. You can escape having a baby you don't want until you're ready because now you can get an abortion and nobody's going to question that. And a lot of the stigmas have been removed. Um, but I sorry, what was
Well, I'm trying to get at what drives these feelings about men because
Yeah, 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 yeah,
I
yeah.
don't yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So here's the thing. I go into my coming of age with these ideas that I'm entitled to these freedoms and I'm entitled to these escapes. Then you're on the lookout for whatever flaw in the man tells you that you've got to escape. And I think that women are now looking for these things and then there's something wrong with him and I have to escape. And this is absolutely something that I internalized. But I also had had so many one night stands by that time also that there's a pattern of abandonment and just going to the next one, and then you're kind of looking for the right one, but then the right one could have something wrong with him, and then you have the right to get out. And so all of this is floating around in the ether, right? And how do you find the one when you are being indoctrinated into, oh, I got to get out because this is abusive, or this sounds abusive, or he doesn't sound feminist enough, or he doesn't sound supportive enough, and you're constantly on the lookout for these flaws that you are now entitled to escape. And I absolutely did take a lot of that stuff very seriously, that marrying someone was not necessarily an exercise in learning how to navigate another human being, but watching for the signs that would tell me it was time to run away. So, and I can hear this in so many other people's stories of, why their marriages failed. And it's usually an appeal to emotion and not necessarily what my parents' generation would have endured. They would have just endured it. But the other thing is that if you don't have any kids, it's different from, say, my parents' generation. My mother had 4 kids with my dad. Across the street, there were 6 kids. There were 5 kids down the block. There were 8 kids over here. If you have a lot of kids, you're a lot less capable of bolting. So, with my generation, we get into maybe you're not going to have kids until you're like 37 years old. And so then you only have one or two. And it's easier to dissolve a marriage with 1 or 2 kids than it is to dissolve a marriage with 5 or 6 kids. And also, you're indoctrinated into looking for the signs that or the red flags that tell you you'd better get out of here or you're going to be in this abusive situation. I was reflecting on one guy, like I was thinking, okay, well, if I had stayed with any of the people that I left over the years, and there were many, um, what, which one would have been the best?
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, I wound up with alcoholics. And, the rule was if they were an alcoholic, you had to get out of there, right? You couldn't see them through to the other side.
I understand. But,
So they would, most of them had drinking problems.
well, that leads me to another question outside of our outline is that, well, looking at this content, I think to myself, well, if we're so terrible, why deal with us at all? Meaning, I see
Well,
these see, even I saw one with
not.
yeah, well, even I saw one with a video today, actually, and this one being that I'm subscribed to her, just out of curiosity, and also she actually this feminist that I follow on YouTube actually brings up some good points, but she brings up points that are true, but they're points that how to explain this? They're points that she knows are in the woman's favor because the woman has the reproductive system, so that she knows that the women in this area of life have the leverage over us, and also because men are greatly attracted to women, probably more attracted to women than women are attracted to men. And she's great. She makes that known in her videos. But she said something, for example, about women going their own way, meaning we're just going to buzz off and you men need us. You need us. You know you need us, which is true. So generally speaking, not every individual man needs a woman, but generally speaking, if you're, men need women and women need men. But she also said something about the pill. Now that we have the pill, we don't need to have your babies. But wait a minute, I think you're going your own way. Why would you need the pill if you're disassociating from us? Does that
Uh,
make any sense? Does
yeah.
it make sense? So you want to disassociate from us, but you also want to do the most intimate acts with us. Well,
Hmm.
some of us, only the select few men that are worthy in their eyes. But this leads to all kinds of inconsistencies in feminism, because even feminism itself, my view is that, and I think this is true, is that feminism cannot even get anywhere without the enforcement of men. Where would it be without the enforcement of men? Women get their power through men. It's one of the means they get their power from, or their bodies or their children. So, how can they have any movement without male enforcers?
Well, what's going to happen is they're just going to be doing artificial insemination. I mean, I suppose the men still have to donate the sperm, but basically, isn't that what we've come to? Is that men are basically sperm donors at this point?
Well,
I mean,
yes,
unless you can find a woman who is not like that, we're at the sperm donor stage.
right. Well, that's what I believe that we
And I
have.
wasn't going to do that, so I wound up with nothing. But I wasn't going to have kids without a father. I just wasn't going to
Right,
do it.
right. But you see, what I said before, 100% ownership of the reproduction is that my view of feminism is that it is anti-father, meaning that what I believe we have now, and even though I'm married, I don't refer to individual marriages like this. I refer to the institution of marriage right now. I refer to it as clown marriage, because the institution of marriage was meant first and foremost for the establishment of fatherhood. That's the first and foremost goal aim of it. And also there comes the secondary and tertiary benefits, meaning that you have a partner in life, and also the bonds between people, as you said, because the reason why it's harder to have a divorce in those days was harder is because with all these children, there was a bond between people generally.
Yeah,
Two families coming together. Now we have this individualistic view of marriage where it's only two lovebirds. And as you said with Leslie in the conversation on Radical Center, is that it became this thing where all of your needs, all your entertainment, all of your diversions have to come from this one single person. Well,
yes.
that's also impossible. And I see it that if that's what it is now, you're going to wind up driving each other absolutely nuts.
Exactly. And that is exactly, I would say, when I look back on my own experience, probably the biggest error, the one that really just pivoted my life in this irrevocable direction. I did get married after all of the, abandonment and whatever really messed with my head. But I did marry a pretty nice guy when I was 27. But I got pregnant before we got married and I just aborted it. And I didn't really think twice about it. And actually, the doctor was like, "But you said you were going to get married. Like, are you sure?" And I wrote this into my novel. Well, I was sure then, but I'm not sure now. It's just the narrative is so strong in some ways. I had just gone back to college. I was falling asleep in my classes because I was pregnant. And it was just this I saw it as an inconvenience. And I would say that that is what is being what everybody is, not everybody, but what is being absorbed at this point in time is that it's this inconvenience, and it's only okay to do it when it's absolutely convenient for you. And I look at doing something like that and I think, what the hell? What was I thinking? It was probably my last chance to do exactly what I wanted to do. But not only that, he wasn't exactly the most responsible person, but I do think that probably this is what made everybody grow up. That is what happened to
Yes.
you as a couple, and then he has to spring into action. And also, we had lots of people around us who would have been watching us and sort of keeping
Yes.
check on us, right? We had a huge amount of social capital. And but what did we do? Well, one of the reasons why, I just had to get this abortion was because I wanted to live in a better city than Chicago. I wanted to live in San Francisco, and he actually didn't want to go. And I basically dragged us there. And then there we were alone in this culture that was totally immersed in protracted adolescence. Like we were the only married people among the people that we were meeting there. Nobody was married. That was like something the Midwesterners still do. And that also made it very difficult for us to stay together because it wasn't something people around us were doing. But if in my parents' generation, my parents got married, my mother was pregnant and they got married. She actually did go to the abortion. She did go to a backdoor it was with me, by the way. She did go to a backdoor abortion and chickened out, and here I am. And I am meaning to write a compare contrast between my mother and me because I had the right to get an abortion and look where it got me, whereas she had four kids and she has four people at least looking out for her. She's had dementia for some years, and I shudder to think what her fate would have been if she didn't have these four kids watching out for her. That is not going to be my situation. It's not going to be the situation of a lot of the people I know because they don't have kids. And even one of my really good friends from high school, who is married to someone who has a lot of siblings, and she has siblings, but she even said taking care of her parents was a full-time job. And she's like, oh my God, who's going to take care of me? And she's in a better situation, so social capital wise, than I am.
Yes, I understand. Well, you do hit upon something that that Roger Devlin said in Sexual Utopia and Power. He said that feminism has this notion of infinite choice, like you're saying, meaning that to me it's infinite choice, meaning that there's some way out somewhere. Meaning that even before that a relationship starts, we have to have no default divorce there because in case this happens, meaning that or this person is not entertaining me anymore. I have to get someone new. Meaning there's all these constant outs. There's no
Yeah.
commitment. Even the abortion, the pill. There's no like well, lack of a better word, there's no commitment. There's
Yeah.
no commitment to something.
A sacrifice anymore,
Yes. So
which I've written about. That's a chapter in my book. The age of perennial adolescence and the end of sacrifice is the title. Um, yeah, it's I basically am somebody who took every single out and didn't sort of find my ability to stick to something until it was too late. But I was
yes,
also thinking this was something I was going to get at earlier, and I lost my train of thought. But one of the reasons why I would say, even by the time I came of age, and I'm married, I'm getting married age in like 1980 or so. But already a lot of the men that I knew came from broken homes, and my ex-husband came from a really pretty badly broken home and was abandoned by his father in a bar in Denmark. His father went to chase after some woman in Sweden and left him with strangers in a bar and didn't return. And those people took care of him and put him in high school in Denmark. And eventually his mother sent for him to come to the United States. Uh, So what could I possibly even have expected from men who had seen, and in this case it was their fathers who took off, it wasn't their mothers. Um, what could I expect from men who'd already seen their own homes broken up, and some of them were really still nursing those wounds into their 20s? And but at the same time, I feel that I have to be having sex right away with people, and then I don't know how to cobble a relationship together out of it. I do see other women doing that, although I can't necessarily say that those relationships lasted. But I'm looking around me and I'm seeing people who go home together when the bar closes, who are somehow moving in together. And I'm not able to do that for whatever reason. And it wasn't until I was in my late 30s that I started to realize that, well, maybe, I'm not something you can bring home to mom anymore,
I understand.
you know, because I've basically followed all of the feminist stuff off a cliff. And, I had to kind of figure out a way. I actually read a book called The Rules.
I've heard of that.
And and I basically reinvented myself. And it was when I reinvented myself vis-a-vis that book that they started sticking around.
I,
So,
yeah, well, that's going to segue into something else that you looked over in my outline. One of the ideas I have to talk about right now is that and I want to cover this at length, maybe in another video, because I think it's very important, and it actually is affecting the birth rate and the relationship between the sexes. And some people might think that this is odd or radical or off the wall, but I do believe that what wrecked the sexual market uh, is are dating and relationships and boyfriend and girlfriends. I no longer think that these three constructs, in not in all cases, but in most cases, are inconsequential, because over 100 years ago, dating did not exist, and we didn't call it relationship either. We called it marriage. It was marriage. It was not a relationship. I don't recall. Go ahead.
Well, I think I would define it as when you were dating, there was a telos that everybody had agreed upon.
Yes,
By the time we get to my generation, you don't know what you're doing.
that's what I'm
And
referring
then
to.
and then it was up to me to ask, and I could never get up the nerve to ask. So I would allow myself to be used.
See, that's where I'm going here, meaning that these kinds of constructs that, okay, can I say that it's dependent on how you look at it. Dating as it was, let's say, courtship, that's what I think you're referring to when you actually know what's going on and who's with who and boundaries and steps to take, family involvement, etc. That's one thing. That's one way of, let's say, dating. But when I refer to dating, that's not what I'm referring to. And when I say boyfriend and girlfriend, I don't mean people who are going to get engaged in 2 years after meeting each other. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm talking about these other situations. Now they're called situationships that go absolutely nowhere. And to me, this causes a uh, kind of like almost like a jam up of the sexual marketplace altogether. Because when
Yeah.
someone says boyfriend and girlfriend to me, again, I don't mean in all cases. To me, boyfriend and girlfriend, like if someone's a boyfriend or girlfriend, it means I have one foot in the relationship and I have one foot in the sexual market also.
Yeah.
I'm expecting commitment from you, but I'm not committed. Someone is not committed in that. And you'll see often how this goes is that, again, this is a male space. This is pro male. It's pro everybody pretty much, but it's a male space. So I still have criticisms of my fellow man. If they want to criticize me, that's fine. Also, they want to push back on this, but we all know we do know what happens in these situationships. The woman is quote dating the man. She's the girlfriend. She's cohabitating with him. She's hanging on for dear life, and he mysteriously is not committing. And then these women get into these quote. I put it usually when I write relationships, I put it in quotes. They get into these quote relationships, and then 2 to 4 relationships goes by, and then poof, the 20s are gone. And now there's the history of neurotic exes, the exes I live with, the man who I live with who I gave emotional labor to. Well, what would happen in these? What did people expect to happen in these relationships? And also, what I think that even from my own personal experience, and I don't have the room here to go in too much of my personal experience, is that it creates a situation where people who do want to be serious are now out of the means to be serious because this person's jammed up, that person is jammed up. It creates just this mishmash with no barriers and no lines, no boundaries, nothing. So, what do you think of that? Now, if
Well, that's what started with my generation.
yes,
That is, it started with my generation
yes,
because, like I said, the people just older than we were getting married and having kids, and it just in my experience, it really was like you did not know what you were doing, and most of the time you were just having sex right away. And then what do you do with that? And then think about the psychological damage that causes. I don't really think it hurts men nearly the way it hurts women, but then, I don't know how to articulate how I feel about this. I don't know how to ask somebody that I'm having a situationship with whether this can turn into something else. It used to be that the objective was we are dating to find out whether we are compatible enough to get married. That is
yes,
what my mother was doing. And everybody was doing that. And now we have this system where it's just up to the individuals and you don't know which
right,
individual you're dealing with. And that was my experience. Like, there was a guy I was seeing, and then I remember even feeling so insecure, like to even dare to call him my boyfriend. By this time I'm 24, 25 years old, and the word boyfriend feels like something I'm not even allowed to say, even though the guy calls me about every, oh, bi-monthly and takes me out to dinner, all these, but I don't know what this is. I don't know what to call it, and I don't even know how to ask him about it. I remember every morning after we would go out for breakfast, and I would be sitting there like, I have to tell him that I can't keep doing this. And I'm so afraid that when I tell him I can't keep doing this, I need to know where this is going, he's going to tell me he doesn't want it to go any farther, and that's going to be the end of it. And
Right.
my psyche can't take that rejection again and again and again.
Right, but as I said before we were chatting, if we did return to, let's say, some of the old-fashioned ways in which a father can vet a man, well, vet a boy or man, whatever we got to
If
say
he's
here.
around anymore, though, I mean,
Well,
then
that's the issue because when I told you before, and I've said it throughout my videos, because I am astonished by the airheadedness of fathers for my generation, is that I've said it throughout my videos, and this is the way it's going to. This is what I think is that, as I said several times, I have a daughter. Is that I personally can look at a man or talk to a man very briefly and already make my decision that I don't like this man. And I don't mean it because I'm some judgmental prick who doesn't like other people and I'm snobby. No, no. When I say that I know who a bad man is, I'm not going to think that about a good man. I'm not going to meet a good man and think, "Oh, you're a good man. Get out of my face. I don't want you near my daughter." I'm going to say, "No, this is bad news." And if I make the wrong judgment, well, what's that saying? Uh, they say it in Australia, tough, stiff cheddar, tough luck. That's it. So, but then if you mention this to people in this current day and age, they'll say that you're controlling,
yeah,
you're domineering. So, I've said it before, I'll say it again, is that so we're willing to uh, go for freedom, meaning the freedom of someone who could be put in a precarious position or actually be abused, not actual abuse. So we're going to sacrifice our children's safety on the altar of freedom, I call it. Now, how do we get out of this jam? Because people do look at fathers like this, because um, that's why I call it clown marriage. I mean,
yeah.
my wife and I personally, us as a team, we as a team are on the same page. But what I see here now is that many men are getting into situations where they're not on the same page.
Well, one of the dumbest errors of in judgment I ever made in my life was signing a 50-50 contract. And that is also what used to be the case, right? The male, for the most part, made the final decisions in the family, and this was considered inequitable, right? And so we got to get rid of that. Young women were resenting being controlled by their fathers, and wives are resenting being controlled by their husbands. And we can all kind of understand wanting to have your own money. And there were some good, reasons for rethinking the system to a certain extent. But as I reflect on what the patriarchy entailed, and you know, uh, I would argue, and I'm going to be arguing for giving men the final say in how things run in the household. I do see how my father died when I was 20, so that really was the end of our family, also, by the way. I mean, and it's an interesting thing to think about. He wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There were some terrible things that he did. But I also would never in a million years have wanted our family to dissolve over the things that he did that were pretty bad. Um, and it is interesting to think about how much chaos ensued after he passed away, and my mother was the only person at the helm.
Yes,
And I have talked to other people about this who've said, who've observed similar effects where, a father dies or is gone, and it's just, all hell breaks loose. Um,
yes,
when I signed that 50-50 contract with another woman on a project I was working on, and I remember I didn't want to sign a 50-50 because the project was my idea in the first place. A friend of mine who works in Hollywood got involved with the project, and for one of the first things he said to me, "I hope you didn't sign a 50-50 contract." And I said, "What?" He said, "No one in Hollywood does that." Hollywood, probably one of the most co-opted by, feminist ideology kinds of places lately you could possibly imagine. He says, "No, nobody signs a 50-50 contract. Somebody always has to have 51% at least. Somebody has to have the final say." And so one of the things that I read in the sort of feminist argument world is that they don't like having to answer to somebody. They want to have complete control over their kids, and they don't want to have to negotiate. And what happened in that 50-50 contract, interestingly enough, was I had to constantly negotiate with this person. It was exhausting. And I think sometimes she would withhold agreeing just because it gave her some kind of power, and it was just, I was actually doing like 90% of the work. She was just controlling me. So it really what was happening there, and controlling what I could and could not do with, what was ostensibly mostly my work. And I think that when the men were the providers, it made perfect sense for them to have final say over things. But now we have this obligatory women working issue. And I would say that's probably in addition to the pill and the endless boyfriend status, work having to work is what I would say one of the greatest impediments, because the men don't feel like they are providing anymore.
Well, I mean, I am for women cultivating their talents, and if they, I mean, how do we get her? I mean,
Well, here's why. Let me just explain why. I could not imagine not working for a day. I couldn't even, because I had been supporting myself and barely. I couldn't imagine taking time off to have a baby. It just seemed impossible.
right.
And a lot of the people I knew who were having babies were not necessarily white middle class people like myself, but people who were living in, and actually, when I'm thinking about this restaurant where I worked, the Hispanic girls were having babies and their husbands were in jail. But they had these family systems that could
Yes,
support them. I didn't have that. So I
right.
I couldn't, and then the guy is like, well, I'm the one, I'm making money and he's making a little money, but he's not making enough money to support both of us.
Well,
It's as if whatever would, whereas when my parents met, my dad was working for Honeywell. My mother could afford to quit working when she had me. She was going to go back to work and then she decided not to, and she had that choice. I mean, that's the interesting thing. The choice to work has actually taken the choice to not work off the table. I
yes,
remember leaving my waitressing at the pizza place job one night, wondering how in the hell I was ever going to have children, because it seemed impossible,
right.
because the support system was gone. I was going to be relying on one person. I couldn't imagine even taking a day off of work. How was I going to do this? Because all I could see was supporting myself. Even if there was a man there, it was all I could see, because that's all I had been doing was barely supporting myself. So how was I going to relinquish that control and cede control to the guy? And this is also on the heels of sleeping with this guy and not having a relationship with him, and then sleeping with this guy and not having a relationship with him, and then sleeping with this guy and not having a relationship, and oh, finally I'm in a relationship and I'm getting married, but I can't imagine ceding control to him because I've been barely able to support myself. That's why I went to the abortion clinic right away, even though I was getting married, because I couldn't see it. Yet my mother could see it. My mother was working.
Well, I see
That's where
everything
she
you're
met
saying.
my biological father and the man who became my dad, at work. she worked. So, but she felt like she could stop working and have children. I didn't feel that way.
Right. I mean, I see everything you're saying because eventually, someone said if you eventually something like a right is going to become an obligation, meaning that you have a right to work, but now it's obligatory that middle class families have the dual incomes. But but I do think that women should have the means to support themselves if they choose not to get married. In the case that a husband dies, what do you think of that? I mean, should have means to work.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how we can get back to a system that is conducive to forming families and producing children. If you go to college and graduate school, by the time you get out, you're in your late 20s. And if
Yep.
you haven't met a man there, and it's getting even more difficult because Title IX has basically made relationships between the sexes fraught with danger.
Right.
And I think, men are justifiably wary of getting involved with young women in a college setting for sure.
Right. Well, I've covered that in my previous videos. I've covered in my previous videos entire conversations about the divorce regime, and it's supposed to. It is a regime, and it is a life-wrecking regime, fraught with corruption and life and family-wrecking forces in it. So that's another story, also.
Yeah. And also, most of the people your age and younger don't even know what a whole neighborhood full of intact families looks
Yes.
like. I really do feel like I'm a relic. I'm like this person coming from the past and saying, it used to be like this.
Right. Right.
Everyone was doing this.
Yes, because when I was very young, actually, my uncle, well, actually, my grandparents lived in Dulles, Queens, and even on July 4th, everybody on these, it was like a little a development in Dulles, Queens, where most people knew each other, and on July 4th, everybody was out on July 4th, meaning that
Mhm.
even the next day, the amount of debris from the fireworks, everybody in that small development came together and started cleaning up after the fireworks were done the previous night, meaning that people just knew each other. Even me, I mean, in those, that small town I grew up in with the garden apartments, lower middle class in Queens, people did know each other. There was a community center where young and old people went. People knew each other. They had all kinds of events there. They had teen night. They had things for older people. They had all kind of basketball courts, tennis courts, a pool. I mean, people did know each other. And as the years went by, uh, yeah, it just became more and more alienating.
Yeah, and my sister-in-law, my brother was born in 66 and I think she was born in 68 or so, and her parents got divorced. She said that she was the only woman with a kid in her apartment complex
Right,
in, 1992.
right.
And that it was so incredibly lonely. And Leslie said the same thing. It's like, how do we get back to dating with intent, which is what Charlie Kirk was talking about,
Yeah,
dating with intent.
yeah,
That's something that I think we really need to get back to. And I think that deep down inside, most women would probably want that. It's just they've been so indoctrinated into thinking that they've got to play around, like, you're not ready until your prefrontal cortex is fully developed, right? You
okay,
know that one.
that's another thing that's buzzing around that I just
Oh,
okay. This
it,
is another one I'll touch upon this also. Not too much. I actually spoke to someone on a forum once. She mentioned, okay, this is a healthcare practitioner. She mentioned the frontal cortex thing.
yeah. Until
So
you're
I said,
25, you're still a child
well,
until
yeah,
you're
right. But
25, right? And then all of a sudden it
right.
closes.
People, yeah, exactly. So people can study starting at the age of 18. They could study physics, they could study biology, engineering, they could drive cars, they could be a policeman, they could be a nurse. They can actually, even if you finish law school fast enough, you could be a lawyer at 20 to 40 to 25 years old. So we're getting giving all these responsibilities and complicated topics to study of people whose brain is not fully formed yet. So I asked her, I said, so she was explaining to me this also. She said that, you wouldn't want early pre you wouldn't want women to get pregnant because their frontal lobe is not developed yet, so they wouldn't have the maturity to
Yeah.
be a mother to the kid, right? So I said, wait a minute. I said, you just said that you were having sex with numerous men that you like to do fun things with at 18. So I said to her, I said, so by that logic, should we be steering daughters to disassociate from men altogether, meaning just completely sexually segregate because the frontal lobe is not closed yet? And there was no answer. So which is it going to be? You're going to do big girl things? See, my view is this, though, is that it's like you want to do the person wants to do big boy or big girl things, but the consequence we should withhold the consequence even though you have the permission to do that. So it makes
It was the consequence that actually forced you to grow up.
yes. So I okay that whole thing with the age thing. It was my grandmother had my mother at 18 years old, and I don't. Everything was fine. Well, not in her individual marriage, not everything was fine. But as far as raising her children, nothing went wrong with their health, with their
Mhm.
psychological or health care, physical care, schooling, training, and education. Nothing went wrong.
No,
So
my mother's good friend, still friends, grew up next door to each other, got married at 18,
yes,
and has had three kids, two of whom are much older than I am. My mother actually was pretty late in starting her family. She had me when she was 25. Um, though my mother's best friend, her kids went to MIT, Harvard,
right, right, right. And now that we're going down this list, and we're going to wind down soon. Is that when when now do you think that when women, some women, not all, feminists particularly, when they say the patriarchy, do they not understand that the family inherently is patriarchal? Because as Dr. Amneas pointed out, that the father is the weakest link in the family. For marriage, the marriage strengthens the man's position. So inherently, the husband or father is a patriarch. Do
Mhm.
they not understand that?
I think all they understand it is that it's a system of oppression, and they want the get out of jail free card whenever they're feeling like it's not working.
Yes,
And
but
they and this is wreaking havoc on all kinds of people in all kinds of ways,
what?
basically.
Right, but if they were to educate themselves, did they ever look into what a matriarchal society looks like? Meaning
Like this.
there have been matriarchal. I don't know if we could call them societies, but there are some groups of people in the world who live in a matriarchal way. Um, that's those places are not devoid of mistreatment or violence at all.
No,
Talking about, for example, in poor areas where there is, let's say, matriarchal mating, which means that the women compete for the big man on the block
yeah,
and have sex with who they want to, that creates a matriarchy. And pretty much the welfare system created a matriarchy by getting men out of the house.
yeah,
Because, as you probably know, in poor areas, even some white communities, for example, Appalachia or other areas, and also in our inner cities, the slums of our inner cities, they could not get the welfare benefits unless a man was out of the house.
yeah.
So this creates a matriarchy because in those areas, there are mostly no fathers. They're just boyfriends.
Mhm.
So those areas do not look free of uh, totally 100% free of violence, mistreatment, gang membership, drug usage, prostitution, academic failure.
I also think that one of the effects of the matriarchy, I do think we're in a matriarchy and we've been in one for a while.
That I agree with.
Look at all the homelessness,
Yes.
like the tent cities and the drug use. Like I'm following this guy on Substack who's taking pictures of awful street scenes in Portland. And there's a kind of a lenience in women. It's interesting, a kind of a lenience and an inability to set boundaries for some strange reason, which wouldn't seem intuitive because Well, in a patriarchy, women had to set boundaries, right? No, you're not touching me until you put that ring on my finger.
Yes. Well,
But
that's
now,
okay. That's what Dr. Basheville and I said in a conversation is that it seems to me that feminism is against what we've spoken about, against all restrictions, meaning that generally speaking, it is not just the lack of sexual boundaries, it is a lack of boundaries altogether. All
yeah,
societal norms,
yeah,
all restrictions, all constraints are to be done away with.
yeah,
And that is a very dangerous way to run a society.
yeah.
And it is extremely permissive. And that's why we have the problems that we're seeing today.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I'm still gobsmacked by the realization that a matriarchy is actually a death cult because not enough people are being born. People are being, in a lot of households run by single women, the boys aren't learning how to drive or getting jobs. They're just moribund.
Yes,
It really is fascinating. What is it about women that is lending itself to so much chaos, basically, as Jordan Peterson calls it? It's
right. Well, the fatherless crisis, fatherlessness causes all these social pathologies that we're talking about. The ones that I said: gang membership, truancy, teen suicide, teen runaways. Most serial killers did not have a father or a crappy.
not launching into
Yes,
adulthood. Yeah,
yes, the so-called NEAT phenomenon. So this is a very bad situation, and we're getting the effects of it. And see, this is the problem. Also, is that when I brought up, for example, the topic of sexual regulation in societies, because all societies that were serious regulated sex in
hmm,
various ways. And like you said, that even for men in a patriarchy, there were limits on what they could do sexually. Because when people say things about the double standard, well, as the guy Noah who I interviewed a few weeks ago, he said, well, oh, women were shamed, men were hanged. So the archetype of the Chad we have these days, or CAD, those men were dealt with severely. They weren't just shamed. If they acted the way that they did, they would be punished. They would have legal sanctions on them. They would have their income removed, up into including disappearing. So, this whole notion that men were just a bunch of playboys throughout history is just a complete
yeah,
BS.
yeah.
And
It really irritates me too because I think most men really did love their wives
yes,
and cherish their children. And yeah, I got into some back and forth with a lawyer in one of my Substack communities who was saying, well, women were property. They were considered property. And I'm like, I don't take that literally. He was responsible for taking care of his wife. They use the legal term property. His horse was his property. He
yes,
wouldn't have treated his horse like shit just because it was his
right,
property. It assumes that these weren't living things, but property just meant something that you're responsible for and have to care for.
exactly. I mean, but when I even spoken to some other men, I think that men have been kind of infected with this sexual liberation also, because if I were to mention to other men the concept of sexual regulation throughout society, then they look at someone like me like, what do you have a problem? Are you not a sexual person?
Mhm.
Do you not like sex? Are you an incel?
Yeah.
Are you just jealous? Are you just jealous that in the kind of environment that we have, that there's not going to be enough women left over for you because all the stud muffins are going to hog all the women. So it's not just both sexes are lending themselves to this degradation of society. And with that said, I would like to cover this, and I've said this statement so many times in videos that people probably are going to get tired of me saying this. But this line is the one that stood out to me so much in Sexual Utopia by Roger Devlin. People probably know what I'm going to say already. I want to get your opinion of it as a woman who's spilling the beans here. Is the statement is like inflation, sexual liberation turns the market morally upside down by actively rewarding the vicious while punishing the virtuous. What do you think of this statement? Because the reason why I remembered that as soon as I read it is because to me that actually is true. Because as I told you before, and I've said it before, and I don't mind divulging some personal things here, is that when I was very young, I was encountering women. I mean, I was a teenager back then. All of a sudden, all these women have boyfriends. And even in my early 20s, trying to get dates with women, trying to form a relationship, one of these barriers was this constant boyfriend in the background, right? So I said to myself, well, if I want a girlfriend, I am going to have to steal a girlfriend because it doesn't seem that there's any way for how do I form a relationship with someone if all these people are entangled in relationships? And that actually also shows the flimsiness of all this. Because I'm going to divulge this here also. Maybe a little inappropriate. What I'll say is that the first woman I was with, um, she moved across the street from me. I saw her one time in the bakery, and I said, "Hi." Oh, she said that she served me my food, and she says, "You live across the street from me." I said, "Oh yeah, I'm Bradley, right?" She says her name, and I said, "Oh, would you like to hang out sometime?" I didn't think anything of it. I wasn't thinking of seducing her. I was just thinking, attractive woman living across the street from me. Okay, that sounds reasonable for me to ask for a number, and we got into things very quickly. And even the following a few weeks from then, I get this phone call from a so-called boyfriend who starts screaming at me on the phone, saying, and then he was rambling such garbled gibberish, and the only line I heard from him was, "You, the F word, my girlfriend," right? And even other times, a few times where women with quote boyfriends expressed interest in me. But because I was a quote good boy, I said no. I mean, you have the boyfriend. Like we can't do anything, right? And I also went on a date with a very pretty woman, who I actually was surprised that I got a date with because I mean, I thought to myself, well, she's prettier as a woman than I am as a guy. Well, how did this happen, right? So I really didn't like so-called what Rollo Tomasi would say is maintain frame on the date. Meaning I wasn't running the date as if some man who was like confident in making things move forward. So I said, because when I said it to someone that I got a date with this woman, he said, "I think she has a boyfriend." I'm thinking, what's going on here? Is there a single woman out there, right? So that left an impression on me, thinking that, well, you better ready to get, you better ready be ready to fight someone for a woman. Maybe not physically, but in some form or another. This is the kind of situation that I think sexual liberation does create. It creates this heightened aggression between men. For example, when you said before that you don't think that the sex affects men in the same way that it affects women, meaning that you could have a sexual encounter and the woman might feel poorly of herself for making the wrong decision, while the man just satisfied himself and is not really burdened by this action. But men are burdened by something else, by the situation. What do you think of that line and what I'm saying here? I'm expanding upon it.
Well, when you talk about the virtuous part, what I thought of was with the sexual marketplace being boundaryless and
Yes,
nebulous, I didn't, I felt that I had to give the milk away for free or I wouldn't get anything at all. So I'm not being virtuous, right? It's virtuous to hold on to it and say you're not getting it
yeah,
until. But because so many other women are giving it away, you kind of have to also. And
right.
it isn't going to be, and this is something that just recently occurred to me. It used to be that you would call, if somebody was giving it away, all the other women would call her a slut. And now we have this slut walk, right? Because you're not supposed to call women a slut. This is, against the tenets of feminism, but calling a woman a slut back in the olden days was because she was kind of ruining it for the virtuous by being a slut. Right now, everybody's a slut, and there are very few virtuous. So it kind of ruins it for everybody.
Right, right. But see, I'm glad you brought that up because the flip side of it is what I just said, meaning that if you're a man and you decide to be virtuous and wait, well, you could be waiting forever.
Yeah, so I didn't know, like, Well, if she's going to give it away, then she's going to get him.
Right. See, the flip side
So
of
I
the,
can't withhold it.
right,
Even
exactly.
though I
Because
want to, and I've come around to realizing that that's really going to be the only way I'm going to get a commitment out of somebody.
right. Well, you're saying something to agree with me because on the flip side, what I just said is that, well, if in my case I was the guy, if I wasn't moving forward enough quickly, well, you're going to lose this woman to a man who will do this on the first date,
Yeah, and
will move
actually
quickly.
I've seen women like what's wrong with him? He's not making any moves on me.
Right.
And
So,
actually that's what happens in my novel. He won't fuck her.
okay, all right. Okay, yes, exactly. So, and in closing, I because we've covered a lot of things here, is that I mean, I think that, for example, this obsession with freedom. I mean, I've told people before, is that that there's this fascination, this obsession with freedom here, and I'll ask people, well, where did this all these freedoms get us? Where did all this lack of limitations get us? Um, and people usually respond with that you if there were family involvement in the courtship process, if there was oversight, you're limiting people's freedom. You're oppressing people.
Well, people don't question that, right? They don't question that. They think that this is just a given. So, when I mentioned on Facebook that so many kids are growing up without a father, and this guy starts hammering away at that, I'm thinking, he is just doing this by rote. He hasn't really
Yes.
stopped to think about it. And there was also something else, I don't remember now what it was, but he was arguing for this free sex. He's like, I know a lot of women. Oh yeah, I think it was because I wound up saying, and I can't remember what started it, but I said, I know plenty of women who have indulged in this and who walk away saying, I know I'm supposed to like this, but deep down inside, I don't.
Right.
And then he started arguing with that. And somebody else who actually I became friends with on Facebook because he saw my talk with Leslie, he actually came in, in the patriarchal way and said, it's not good for women. It's not good for them. They might say that they like it, and this was my argument. They might say that they like it. They might say that they want it because that's what we're being indoctrinated into saying we want. But I said, but the truth is, we don't want this. We want commitments. We want somebody who's going to stick around, and all of this transactional stuff until you finally realize that you're tired of it. Well, by that time, you don't even know,
Right. But you, right.
and
Right.
actually, that's the thing. I got wired for abandonment. That's what happened to
Yes.
me.
Right. Because I actually do have sympathy for women because you know, I think that I can't. I mean, how do I put this? I do have sympathy because if a woman is wasting time with man after man, I mean that 3 to 4 relationships in the 20s are frittered away, expecting commitment from these men. I mean, that does cause a high level of jadedness. I mean, I could, to deal with a guy who's not committing and to deal with each personality and each person's needs and quirks and individual situations. I mean, like I said before, would mess someone up. I mean, you're dealing intimately with several people. I mean, after a
Yeah.
while, you just get sick of people already. Um, do you?
There was one, have you heard of that Vogue article where it is having a boyfriend cringe or something like
Oh,
that?
should you be embarrassed for having a
Yeah, I
boyfriend?
wrote a piece called The Uncanny Look of Love on my Substack, Notes from the Underdog L. And in that piece, in the Vogue piece, there's a woman who was dating a guy for 12
Oh, yeah,
years.
yeah,
And I wrote, what the hell are you doing dating somebody for 12 years?
yes,
How and now they've broken up, and she's glad that she never posted his picture because now, she doesn't have to look at these old posts. And I'm like, back in my childhood, 12 years would have begotten 5 kids
Right. We see that.
and a whole community of people that you couldn't just up and disconnect yourself from without a lot of grief. 12 years.
Yeah. Well,
What?
I know this might sound funny, but maybe a little ironic. But when I saw that headline, the cynic in me said, "Yes, you should be embarrassed for having a boyfriend." I
Yeah,
mean,
right. Well, from that perspective, yeah.
yes, yeah,
But for 12 years, yes. What the
yes,
hell are you doing dating for 12 years?
right. That's why I've steadily posted on X. Sometimes I'll say, uh, I've said things like that. I've said before that if someone is 22 years old or over and they've been in a relationship for, let's say, 2 to 3 years, maybe you should be a little embarrassed. So,
Yeah.
so I think that sums it up. I do not know how we're going to go from here as a society, except for, let's say, forming our own communities or little pockets of people who are like-minded with each other. I often recommend that men, particularly, start forming their own groups and social circles to bond with one another, because I believe that most male spaces have been eroded, and men. A lot of the I'll make it snippy here because we got to wind down. Is that I believe, as I said in my prior videos, that a lot of the complaints that men are having these days, and I express online, is they can't find a woman. But my view is this: is that not finding a woman is a symptom of something wrong in another area, meaning that many men are isolated. Well, if you're isolated, you're not going to meet a woman. If you don't even know other men or people generally, you're not going to find a woman. But it's not just that. I do this focus on women, this focus on getting a woman and getting dates, and this enormous effort in finding mates. I believe should be directed at other things first, or just for one's own fulfillment and happiness in life generally.
Well, I think what Charlie Kirk was doing with Turning Point USA was creating a place where people can meet.
That too, yes.
And it used to be that you would meet people in your own community and you would
Through
meet
people,
people at
yes,
church.
yes.
And but also in my generation, I would say this whole marrying your high school sweetheart. Well, how how could you possibly
That, yeah.
you're not fully formed yet. But I will say something else that I observed when Facebook started, and a lot of people who didn't marry their high school sweethearts wound up finding them on Facebook and divorcing the person they married later and going back to that person because I would say that hormonal intensity at that age is designed to get you mated at that age. And hopefully, if we can jettison this stupid narrative of getting out and
Oh
quitting
yeah, yes,
and enduring,
right,
because plenty of marriages go through a phase where you're leading separate lives and then the kids are out of the house and you look at each other and you rediscover one another.
right.
I just finished reading a whole bunch of novels by middle-aged women who are divorced with their 7-year-old kid and they move into an apartment in New York, like, and they don't even know why they're divorced, and now they're looking for
Yeah,
another man.
yes,
It's like it's almost like it's just become part of the fabric to look at everything as a temporary
yes,
transactional
right.
thing and not a relationship that you're forming for life, not just with one person, but with a whole
Yes, a community,
extended,
yes,
number of people.
yes.
And just, one other example I can give is a friend who actually didn't have children with this person, but, has been married to him for several years. And he wound up leaving for a while and left her alone. And she wound up having some affairs. she she was the most attractive, the one all the guys wanted of us coyotes, tall, blonde, the one with the
Yeah.
good parent, the strict parents. Anyway, so we're talking, about, like, well, I'm saying, well, maybe, maybe you should leave him, he left you, I'm kind of going back and forth. And then she finally comes around to, she says, you know what, I can't do it. I just can't, because I love his family. Our families are intertwined and I can't do it. And he wound up returning and they went back to normal. And there's something to me that's very beautiful about that.
Yes.
about that maybe you can go your separate ways for a while, but that relationship endures, and
Yes.
it's a place to return after
Right.
you've strayed. And
Yes. You don't have to sow your wild oats. I don't know who came up with that term or thought it was beneficial, but you don't. And also, we've been discussing the adverse effects to society for people sowing their oats,
yeah.
including family formation and the well-being of children.
Mhm.
And also the enormous expense monetarily and socially and with criminality and everything that's stemming from this ridiculous free-for-all. So it was great talking to you today.
I can get you too.
It was a lot of fun. So can anybody find you anywhere on the net for any of your content?
Well, I have a Substack where I'm writing piece by piece, a requiem for the patriarchy. It's Notes from the Underdog L. And I would say that's pretty much it for now.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna go now. And have a good night.
You too.